All right, thanks everybody for joining today. We have two speakers that are going to be going over a project that we've been involved with for a little bit. We have George Robb from ESnet and EPOC, and we have Julio Alvarado from the University of Central Florida and the Arecibo Observatory. And they're going to be talking about a little bit about the Arecibo Observatory, the science, and the recent happenings there, where there was a little bit of a disaster that some people may have heard about. And then an effort that the EPOC Center has been engaged with to try to help migrate some of that data to more stable locations at the Texas Advanced Computing Center in Austin. So I'm going to turn it over to Julio and George, and they're going to talk all about what they did.
All righty. Thank you, Jason. Let me get everything set up here. There we go. Okay, so yeah, first of all, thank you, Jason. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Julio, and I'm the Big Data Program Manager at the Arecibo Observatory. And yeah, I'm gonna be with our colleague here. I'm gonna be covering. Can you still hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay.
We can hear you, Julio.
Give me 1 second, please. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Yep, we can hear you. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh man. Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna try it again. Better. I'm just trying this new Linux in my computer, and it looks like it's not playing friendly with anything, with any of my peripherals. So here we go. Alrighty. So yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna be covering a little bit about what's going on with Arecibo, what we've been doing since our unfortunate events back in December last year, and how we got this effort together. And in part is greatly thanks to guys like Jason who were the spark in this effort and put all of the right contacts together at the right time. So yeah, let's get started. For now, I think everyone knows what's big data, right? But in a nutshell, it's basically lots of data and the right resources to transfer them, process them, and store them. And to give you a perspective of how much data we're talking about in Arecibo, we found that our archives are approximately 3 terabytes, and that's an archive of 55, 56 years of science that we've been doing at Arecibo. And on sunny day cases, we were able to generate over 76 terabytes per day on certain cases, and I'm gonna be covering them on later. And what we're doing in terms of big data at Arecibo. So we are first of all, we started the program back in August, and right on time with the unfortunate events. So our priorities changed immediately to data transfer. But we've been also working on efforts directed to data management. First of all, to organize catalog and how to make that data accessible to the scientific community, and how to facilitate the access and computing resources to the scientists that want to do science out of our data. Most of our data was captured back in the time and it was never looked back. So they filled their purpose at the time, and nobody has looked at them since then. At Arecibo, we had three main sciences: radio astronomy. It's basically study the waves produced by solar objects, by for example the sun, the planets, pulsars. We also have atmospheric sciences. That's the study of the ionosphere. So anything between 30 and 600 miles above the Earth, atmospheric sciences is a science that studies that layer. Mainly using instruments like lidars, like photometers and X-rays. And we also had planetary radar, and that's the science that used our most powerful instrument back in the time. And the main purpose was to describe or characterize objects like Venus, or like the sun, or like the rings of Saturn. Now, a little bit about the instruments, and I really focus on this one, on the alpha, the L-band, the Arecibo L-band feed array, because it was what differentiated Arecibo from the other telescopes. As you can see in the image, it had 7 beams, and it had the capability to be an ear and to be a mouth. So it even when it was mainly used as on a passive mode, meaning that it was only hearing, it could also send signals back into space. So that was our differentiator back in the day. And this is the instrument that, in some cases, it was able to generate 875 megabytes per second, and that's approximately 76 terabytes per day. This instrument was mainly used, it was left pointing to somewhere in the space, and then as the Earth rotated, it created kind of a drift survey. So that's what the scientists call passive mode. One of the biggest discoveries, or maybe improvements of the alpha, we can see it in our image. Back in 1971, the instruments that Arecibo had, meaning only radars, were able to capture probably not as detailed image from Venus. And then back in 2015, when we got the alpha installed, it was able to get this much more detailed image out of Venus. So that's kind of a comparison of the improvement that these kind of instruments brought to Arecibo back in the day. Also, a hot topic right now on the scientific world, and specifically in astronomy, it's the fast radio bursts, or FRBs. Back in 2007, when the Parkes telescope in Australia discovered this new phenomenon, there was no evidence that could back it up, because it was not a repeating event. So then in 2012, Arecibo detected this FRB and was able to prove that it had a repetition pattern. So the alpha was able to validate that FRBs are repeating phenomena, and we were able to calculate that pattern like on 157 days. So it was shining or transmitting or bursting for 90 days, and then it went quiet for 57 days. So that created a period of 157 days. Now, instruments like the SHIME in Canada and the FAST in China, they are, since now this is getting a more hot topic, they are now more focused on detecting this kind of phenomena. So if I'm not wrong, there have been discovered over 500 FRBs by now, and it's worth noting that the first or the second one was detected back in Arecibo in 2012. Now, when we run this big data program, we didn't have a clue of what our data looked like, right? So one of the first things that we did was to catalog it and try to make the data talk to us. So one of the things that we found is that out of close to 1,800 projects that were done at Arecibo. Approximately 1,200 were focused on the radio astronomy science, and that's mind blowing. You know, more than probably 2/3 of our science was focused on radio astronomy. And also on the picture at the right, we can also see that that's back in the first argument that, you know, that most of our science was done into the galactic plane. That means that's outside of our galaxy. Other interesting thing that I found is that radio astronomy had almost 40,000 observation sessions in approximately 55 years. So that's, to me, that's huge. You know, that means that for more than 40,000 times, scientists and Arecibo personnel got together in our labs, in our room, to make science, to use the instrument, and that tallies up to almost 100,000 hours of observation. So I ran some numbers, and if you put all of that together, that will give you 15 years of nonstop science, 24/7. Yes, Arecibo had, you know, maintenance periods and all that stuff, so that's why it spreads out of in 57 years. And one very interesting one, astronomy was used as reference or as a backup for 335 PhDs. So that means that 335 students or PhDs were obtained thanks to Arecibo's data. So that's a very valuable insight. And yeah, so back in August, we started the sequence of snaps, right? In August 10th, the first cable slipped out of its socket on the tower 4. This is the lower left image here. That's exactly the same tower that was showing the failures. At that point, myself and the AO staff, we were very optimistic that we were going to be able to rebuild, to fix what was broken. But then in November 6th, a second cable snaps out of the same tower. This time the cable was a support cable, and now we knew, and it was validated by the NSF, that the damage was really serious. You know, it was considerable. Now, 4 days later, the platform falls over the dish, causing the major damage and the closure and the permanent closure of the 305 meter telescope. And that's a very important thing to note. What was damaged was the 305 meter telescope. We have a few other instruments that the team is working hard to put back online, so we can keep doing science. First with our data, and then with our supplementary instruments. So the observatory is not closed. The 305 meter, that's what suffered damage. So what we did, you know, at that point, we had no major instrument. So we got together and we said, okay, so our biggest asset right now is the data. So we, out of those 3 petabytes, we had 1 terabyte approximately in online data. You know, that's spinning hard drives, PC accessible. We had another terabyte in offline disks. That's disks that were taken offline because they were not used as frequently as the online. And we had our tape library. That's the other terabyte. That's the archive data that from projects that were done back in the days and were not accessed as frequently. In Arecibo, one of our particularities is that our internet connection is only 1 gigabits per second. So Jason and the team, we were running the numbers, and it was gonna take us over 24 months to transfer at that bandwidth. So that's when Jason pulled some of the strings. We got all these awesome teams together: Globus, TAC, EPOC, University of Central Florida, the CICOE pilot, ESnet, Engine 4 here in Puerto Rico, as well as the University of Puerto Rico. So the way that we designed this is we were gonna store our data intact. We were gonna be using Globus to handle the transfer, to transfer the data securely, to manage the checksums, the validations. The CI/COE and ESnet, they are supporting us on the project management and the network best practices. And Engine 4 and University of Puerto Rico, those are our landing sites in Puerto Rico. So we are taking the data from the observatory in NAS boxes. Each one is approximately 112 terabytes. We physically take them, drive them to Engine 4 and to University of Puerto Rico, and from there we transfer the data to TAC using their 10 gigabit per second wires. And it's pretty. Being in this position, it's pretty exciting because we have found partners. For example, Engine 4, they just happen to have a 10 gigabit wire, doing nothing on their data centers. And thanks to this synergy, we were able to connect with them and be able to move this forward. So as I said, we are loading the data from our Arecibo's data centers to the NAS boxes. We purchased 5 of them, 112 terabytes each one. We fill them in Arecibo. We drive them to one of our partners, to Engine 4 or to University of Puerto Rico. And then from there, we upload it back to TAC and take the NAS back to Arecibo. And I don't want to spoil George's numbers, but at the bottom here, I have some comparisons. Before the tuning that George was able to do in these boxes, we were getting only 45 megabytes per second out of the box. And then after the tuning, after the improvements, we are right now able to transfer data at over 200 megabytes per second. So that's one of the clear benefits that we got from this engagement, from getting together all of these partners. And yeah, I think this is my last slide, so it will be a good segue for George to continue the conversation there. But before, any questions for me?
I don't see any yet, but if people do have questions, please type them in and we can transition to get George presenting.
Right, thank you.
Hey team, happy Friday, and thanks for having me. Let me share screen and make sure that everybody can see this and make it so I can also have eye contact with everybody, or at least try to. Okay, so as Julio was talking about all the science, and well, let me step back and actually follow the slide deck here. The Arecibo Observatory, I mean, it's an inspiration to everyone. And this is a story of data movement, and it became truly so much more than just data movement and so much more than just the data. I'm Robb. I'm a EPOC performance chaser, and I'm also an ESnet infrastructure team, basically sysadmin by trade. Arecibo Observatory, as we've heard, and as you all probably have some story or some background, can think about how it's been doing science or has impacted our lives in one way or another. It's been doing science since 1963. A few of my personal favorites, just barely putting a couple of bullet points on here. Near Earth objects, NEOs, planetary and atmospheric imaging, full spectrum, 1 hertz to 10 gigahertz, active and passive. As Julio said, it can be a mouth and it can be an ear, or it could have been, or was. Distance to the Pleiades clusters, we'd have no clue unless it was for Arecibo. And then, as we saw, the metric ton of scientific discoveries, publications, PhDs, research, just vast amounts of knowledge. I tossed a link on here to some of the legacy discoveries. There's a very extensive list. I'm going to talk a little bit about the gloom and doom of this. I hope we can all be inspired by the end of this also. Arecibo took one heck of a hit, and the hit wasn't just the instrument falling. It started way back in 2006 when the National Science Foundation had to make budget cuts. There was 15% budget cut across astronomical sciences just to begin. 2007, Arecibo's budget was slashed yet again. It was hit so hard that NASA even pitched in about 2.6 mil to help with operational budgets. 2011, and I kind of bolded this. This is when the National Science Foundation said, hey, folks, instruments, teams, everybody, community, we have this data management plan. We're going to try and make this a requirement. Take a moment to go take a look at that data plan. I think I reference a link to it. 2015, a director quits just because of how extensive the funding issues became. And then 2018, a little bit of reprieve. University of Central Florida takes on stewardship. So operations this entire time had been working tirelessly to support and make science happen. That's not it. That was the economic side of it. So let's look at what Mother Nature tossed at her. Hurricane Maria, September 20th, 2017. You guys can key the little quick snippet about how this Category 4 hurricane really did some damage. 90 billion was estimated. The R&E network connection was lost and remained offline since 2012 to UPR. That was a 10 gig line, but it was too expensive to repair due to the budget cuts. Operations resumed after the hurricane and wind power came back and the science went on. Takes another hit. 5.0 to 6.4 earthquakes, January 7th through 2020, 7th through 11th. If you expand out on the US Geological Survey, you can look at the shake map, and it was well shaken, not stirred. And yeah, that is a 007 reference, GoldenEye for all of those who are fans. And we take another hit. So this is Tropical Storm Isaias, July 30th, 2020. Again, I tried putting the same thing, about $4.73 billion worth of damage. And science and operations are still going. The science keeps going. August 10th, as Julio mentioned, and we saw some of the pictures, the first auxiliary cable snaps. This is when, hey, we take a hit, we might be able to recover. Then in November 6th, 2020, a primary cable snaps, and thus thermodynamics, economics, and gravity won. This is December 1st, 2020. In this picture, I call out data center, which is building 1, right here with the yellow arrow. And you notice this tower here. If not mistaken, the top of the tower, and you can see some of the debris, was about 10 meters from hitting the primary data center. Had that happened, this talk probably wouldn't happen because the data would have been permanently lost. 50 plus years. I want to call out also Julio's last slide. Literally, data science to boom, hey, we're now in disaster recovery. The worst place anyone ever imagines being in. It changed in a second. A cable snap, and it all fell. I'm sure we've seen the video of the Gregorian Dome and the horrible event from the drone footage. The mission changed. The mission is now get the data to a safe and stable state. So we've got 2 petabytes, actually 3 when we start including the offline tape storage and cold storage. That needs to get moved. The fiber is still cut. Transfers are running at megs. We've got petabytes to go, and data movement is in scale of years. The team is working they're working themselves to the bone. They're moving network attached storages by hand. The true definition of SneakerNet, 100 plus terabytes at a time, which is literally the full capacity of a RAID, these network appliances, the network attached storage appliances. They're moving them by hand, RAID 0, and taking them to the closest 10 gig line at UPRM, and RUM, and Engine 4. Operations are still going, right? They're working harder than ever and hand carrying these copies of priceless scientific data to safety. Call for assistance occurred, right? So EPOC was engaged, Globus was engaged, UPR and Engine 4 already providing transport links. UCF is starting to facilitate these migrations and getting conversations happen. And then TAC hops in and says, hey, let's catch and secure this data. The team started forming. And this is truly where it's the amazing part. The community came together How can we help? EPOC, I'm blessed to be part of this team. We came together and worked with the UCF teams to understand the data. We took a look at what do we have at hand? Not let's prescribe this solution, let's not prescribe that solution. What do we have? How can we make this mission a success with only the parts available? We thought the people are the network. Let's make this happen. Who can we engage? Where's the knowledge? Who do we tap? And then again, the community really came together and knocked this out of the park. So a general thank you. The EPOC team, we're looking at the problem sets. The site is not accepting new installations. I mean, it's a cleanup site at this point. There happens to be a global pandemic going on. We can't just ship hardware. The closest 10 gig link is an hour away, hand carrying these network attached storage arrays. And the network attached storage arrays, which again are movable, they're small, but mighty, yet they can be tuned. I put a link to a tuning guide. It's just an experimental tuning guide. Enjoy it if you guys want to take a look. That's one of the fun parts. EPOC grabbed a identical network appliance and then saw what we could do to apply ESnet and faster data and data transfer node tuning methodologies to an appliance. That's some of our results. TAC came in. They offered to catch and distribute the data. So they quite literally just waved a magic wand and were able to create a safe and secure 2 petabyte landing zone. The 10 gig link is there. They're offering monitoring via NetSage and dashboarding. Plus, it's a Globus native landing zone. So just an overall woohoo. We've got a safe, stable landing zone. So the mission is really coming together. Globus joined the team, of course. They were always part of the team. I mean, Globus is out there. And then obviously, like rsync versus Globus, this is a spoiler. Globus is an obvious winner. And in proving this, timescale was quite literally years. We were looking at about 2 years to move this data. Using data transfer node technology and the tuning only helped. As I'm giving this talk, the teams are quite literally pulling from tape. So the primary copies are moved. Here's a graph that I wanted to show of before, and after. So the top 2 bars are the 1 gig links. The bottom 2 bars are the 10 gig links. And this is before the tuning, post the tuning, before the tuning, and after the tuning. And the scale here is in days. So roughly a 10x speed up. So in closing, kind of the call for assistance, right? It's so much more than the data. It's the community. This is full disaster recovery. The instrument fell. It truly fell. Worst case scenario, community got engaged. Transfers were in tens of megabytes. When we're done, we're in hundreds of megabytes. We're literally redlining these network appliances, these network attached storage devices. The tools that are available to everyone in this community also. Globus, ESnet's out there, faster data, the science DMZ patterns, the data transfer node patterns. There's also a data mobility exhibition. I highly suggest everybody take a look at that. Find out if your facility, your teams, your DTNs are able to handle, hey, say maybe a terabyte a day, maybe not, get some benchmarks. If not, hey, EPOC's out here. We're happy to engage. Let's see what we can do. Let's look at the tools you and your teams have. How can we improve your facility, your data, your site? Basically, let's supercharge your human network too. The community only comes together. And again, we only use the tools available. There's no such thing as a silver bullet or a one solution fits all. And then, as always, let's hit the mission targets. I want to also give out a few words of caution to site facilities, major facilities, minor facilities, my own workstation, for example. Think about what it means for your disaster recovery. What do you do when your instrument falls, right? The network is part of this instrument. As we saw, in 2012, that cut happened and it couldn't come back online. There wasn't 10 gig to Arecibo. take a look at the data management plan that the National Science Foundation put out in 2011. There's the link to it. There's some sections of it that are really elegant. And then large facilities in particular, especially when you're talking 50 plus years of data, how's your data management plan doing? How's your replica sites doing? Where's your backups? When was the last time they were tested? How's your fiber paths? Are they clean? How can we help? And then, of course, words of caution with hope. The full disaster coverage. The disaster happened, the instrument fell. Primary copies are moved. This one has a silver lining to it. And then if you need to make a call for existence, engage the communities. There's lots of people out there ready to help. EPOC, there's our contact. ESnet, one of science's ISPs, let us help. Again, I wanted to call out the data transfer nodes and some of the things that are used in the science DMZ pattern. Take a look at the data mobility exposition. Let's get a baseline for the communities. What's normal, what's not? Let's get them science moving. Let's drop the clutch on science. And then also want to call out the ISI Center for Excellence pilot. That's a really great project. Take a look at that too. And with that, that's my last slide. I wanted to leave that one up just in case there's any links, and I believe these slides will be made available. So if there's any questions, please let me know, and I'll stop sharing.
All right, thank you, George, and thank you, Julio, for going through that stuff. And we'll put out the call again. If people do have questions they want to ask, please use the chat feature to do so. I have a couple to get us started, and since we have a slightly more technical audience than we did for the Globus World event, I'll ask a couple of technical questions. So I'll hit up Julio first. Now that a majority of the data set is at TAC, what's sort of the current status of going through the data, doing reprocessing, and building up the workflows for the HPC portion of this? Can you give any updates on that?
Yeah, sure. So first thing we're doing is, we are already sharing data. There's people already showing interest for the data, and we are using TAG to put the data available for them. Now on the HPC, we just had a call with them early this week, and we are preparing the procedures and the documentation, the processes to allow access to their specific HPC clusters. So we are working on that. There's a tricky thing, every scientist has their own scripts, their own ways to do science. So we are trying to make everything containerized so that the scientists don't have to be working with pulling the scripts back to TAG or setting their environment, but instead provide them like a containerized way to do science on the TAG's cluster using the data that's already there. And in data management, we now have the ability to look at all of the data. We are already scraping it to get the attributes and to be able to build a data catalog out of it. So that's where we are.
All right, that's great news. So eventually, I'm guessing that there'll be some sort of portal available, and people, even if they're not directly involved with Arecibo, they'd have access to download and do sort of citizen science on that data. Is that the end goal? Yes,
it is. Yeah.
All right. And then my next question that I had here was for George. Originally, I forget the number that Julio put up, but maybe you can quote them. What was the baseline that we were getting out of the NASAs when we were originally doing the transfers? And then what was our final sort of average throughput that we were seeing?
Yeah, the excellent question. Yeah, so when we first started out, our worst case scenario was in the 40 megabyte per second range, and our best case scenario at the end was in the 200s. So it was impressive to see a cross between the network appliance tuning and Globus really drop the clutch and get that data movement.
Okay. And to that end, Greg has a related question. Can you go into specifics of some of the tuning parameters you investigated and used? So certainly go out and geek out on that, George. We have a geeky audience here.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I shared in the chat, and I'll even share the screen, a tuning guide that's experimental. This is just a work in progress. This tuning guide was tested with a 10 gig WAN link latency at 60 milliseconds, and loss at 1%. This was a lab testing environment. So we had an identical Synology DS1890 plus NAS with DSM 6322546. This Synology was identical to what was being hand carried at the time. And again, we did it with the expansion card, and it's a 10 base T. So it's twin axe copper using SFPs back to back. Our mission objective there, again, we were using that ETH4. Our mission objective was to make this thing move. We wanted to go as fast as possible. Two problems. First off, this isn't a DTN by nature. Second off, it's got 4 CPUs, light RAM, and they are appliance grade. So we're talking like Atom-based processors here. Small node, but not like small Sonar node. We're talking small node. So in this, we actually dropped the clutch, and something as simple as 9K MTU was just a massive win. And then we started diving into the mathematics of, okay, and all of this, again, I will want to call out ESnet's faster data. Please, this is all well documented there. This experimental tuning guide is designed only for the Synology NAS, and it's assuming a WAN link. So this will not help when you're going desktop to your NAS in a small home or office environment. Once we did that, we dove into, okay, what can we do to get something running? So took advantage of RC local, made it executable. That way, when the system comes online, we're ready to rock and roll with our tunings. And this is pretty much, let's see, that was okay, that's a nice comment. Oh, this is community editable. Please add comments. If you see something that's obviously wrong, don't hesitate to call it out. If you see something that's objectionable, let's go. We can make this only better. That said, this tuning guide is based off of faster data's best practice. And then again, we refined it ever so slightly because again, the DSM OS doesn't offer like BBR or HTCP. I highly suggest everyone take a look at the Lunch and Learn talk on the BBR. Game changer. It's really neat to see that congestion control go into place. We dive off first into ring buffer tuning, then we go into Q-links, and then standard day-to-day memory. Again, we're looking at MTU probing just to see if anything's there. We go into jumbo frames, backlog, that some of the standards there. And then again, when we were doing TC to set up in the lab simulation, we would ensure it was 60 milliseconds minimum and 1% packet loss. So when RC local is finally run, you'll see, and this was a test from, again, the NAS to Whopper at the time, and Cupcake that lands at the internal testing LAN. You'll notice the retransmits and the packet loss, and we were maxing out what the device could do. And theoretical of this device on that network looks to be about 322. And we were in situation hitting about 200 megabytes. So not too bad for real world versus lab setup. Similar situation here. This is, again, the other side. And again, I've got references here and then the faster data link. Please take advantage of the faster data link and enjoy this. Have fun with it. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that one did. And Sal had a follow-up there on what the device, which specific device it was, which was answered. And sort of to your point earlier, these are sort of enterprise grade NASs that are designed for that sort of use case. And we got about as far as we could with them. That's not to say that they're not useful and not a good device. I think that we're thinking about using the EPOC one that we had spec'd out as sort of a traveling DTN. And the use case that we had in mind are for science groups that may need to go to remote locations. We were working with two groups. One is sort of an archaeology group that travels abroad and just needs to have a way to interact with a satellite hookup or even a cellular network so that it could move some information from the remote field site back. Or another use case that we're starting to look into is more of a domestic use case where we have people going and visiting an archive or something like that and taking some scanners with them so that they could try to digitize library media. And then from there, doing whatever they need to do with the instrument, pumping all that information into something like this traveling DTN, and then being able to have it start sending as they're doing their work versus having to take it home and then move it via removable media. So, they're good for what they are. They're certainly not as powerful as some of the 100 gig things that we have. So Andy has a question. Were you able to figure out where that 1% packet loss was coming from and or improve it at all?
That's a fabulous question. We assumed 1% packet loss in our lab testing just to give a little bit of overhead. There were issues, and when in doubt, check MTU. There was a continual work on paths between UPR and TAC, engine 4 and TAC, the commodity path versus the R&E path. So that was a case where it was great to have, again, the community engaged and see the network engineers go, okay, hey, we're trying from point A to point B. We can ping all the way to this point, still get 9,000 MTU, but right here, we're getting 1,500. So yes, it was isolated. And the other assumption is, we're on twisted pair. That's a long span if you think about it. UPR, aqueous, all the way up to Texas. That's not a small path. So factor in a little bit of speed of light and loss.
All right. And then the last question that I have is sort of a little bit related to what Julio was talking about earlier, trying to reestablish the connectivity. And I don't know if you have any updates or things that you'd want to share, Julio, about sort of what the plans are for Arecibo into the future with regards to networking.
Yep. So we are actually expecting from the an estimate from the commodity provider today. But we are working two things. Short term, we are working to improve our existing connection from 1 gigabit to 10 gigabit using our existing hardware. Then on the long term, we submitted a proposal to have all of the fiber underground from Arecibo to the main connection hub in Arecibo Pueblo, Arecibo town. That will hopefully take us to 100 gigabits on the R&E network. That's on our long term. That's probably December 2022. Now the long term, it's we hope to have it ready by the end of this year. So yeah, we are definitely working not only to sustain our current science, but to support what the scientists are proposing to be our next generation telescope.
All right, well, that's great news. So I'll put out one last call here if there's any more questions that anybody has, and I'll thank Julio and George again for going through this. We'll make sure that we get the slides and the video posted. And I think that we may, yeah, absolutely. And it looks like we may be done on the questions. So thanks everybody for tuning in today. We're going to be going into a little bit of a summer break for these talks. So we're not going to have another one until July 16th. So we're going to be off for 3 weeks. And then when we come back in July, we're going to have, I think, 3 talks in a row from the University of Michigan. They have a software intern program there that they have a couple of students that have been working on things like perf sonar and data movement and a bunch of other projects. So we want to give them the ability to make themselves better speakers and talk about all the great stuff that they're doing. So hope everybody has a good couple of weeks off, and we will see everybody in mid-July. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Right. Thank you.